perspective, the Model T was the original pioneer of a mass-produced vehicle that sold 4 million units in 2023 and 2024. Ford sold over 4 million Model Ts. And then the modern assembly line, which is essentially a conveyor belt system, allowed them to build vehicles like the Thunderbird in only 90 minutes, where before the modern assembly line, that took up over 13 hours. So by the time you got to the Ford Mustang and the Ford Thunderbird, Ford had really perfected manufacturing. That is really what they were known for, where Chevy, when they came out with their first pushrod engine, the small block is really Ford had a lot of great inventions and innovations in their modern history, but probably the most important one is the modern assembly line that allowed the Model T to be built, and eventually the famous Ford Flathead, which allowed the engines to be built in 90 minutes as opposed to 13 hours. Then the Ford Thunderbird was the first personal luxury coupe. The Mustang was the first pony car, and the evolution of all the V8 engines that Ford came out with. The Ford Thunderbird and the Ford Mustang are probably the two best examples of the evolution from the side valve engines to the pushrod engines and eventually to the modular single overhead cam engines. And then even the affordable Ford Pinto and the Ford Escort set sales records that even the Mustang had achieved. Then eventually the Thunderbird and the Mustang. The most common question right now regarding classic cars is, are Ford V8 engines better than Chevy's small block engines? And historically speaking, what is the main difference between how Ford did things and Chevy? And the general answer is to say, hey, Chevy and Ford both made some great engines. And actually most of the comments will say that. There's not as much. The rivalry between Ford and General Motors goes back about 125 years. We're going to be specifically talking about the difference of their V8 engines and when they decided to change certain technologies and which Chevys or General Motors brands are better than the Ford engines and kind of the difference between Ford engine families and General Motors engine families. So let's start out with the most obvious. Ford really pioneered the modern assembly line. So they made mass producing a V8 engine affordable for the general public. So that is really where Ford really cut their teeth, is they took the manufacturing process of automobiles and affordable one-piece V8s, the side valve flathead, and made it affordable for everyday Americans. General Motors probably gets more credit for the marketing and branding of 6 different very popular brands. And after World War II, this became their sort of